40 Republicans in the U.S. Senate plan to strike down the rule that the Federal Register is expected to publish maybe tomorrow, but certainly by the end of the week, that will require private companies with more than 100 employees to either force their staff to get a COVID shot, submit to regular testing, or lose their job. The Republican senators, led by Senator Mike Braun of Indiana, the ranking member on the Senate Help Committee, the subcommittee on employment and workplace safety, will attempt to force the Senate to vote on a resolution disapproving of the rule under the Congressional Review Act. With me now to talk about the latest pushback against the Biden administration's overreach is one of the senators who joined Senator Braun this morning and has been fighting this from the very start. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who serves as a member on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Although almost all of the Republicans are behind this effort right now, I think you got 40-41, you've got a handful of Republicans that weren't with you this morning, but to stop this rule, it will require more than just 50 Republicans. It will require at least one or two Democrats. Can this be done?
You know, some battles we don't win, but it's still worth having the battle. I'm reminded of the right to life and the pro-life battles we have. We lose a lot of times, but it's still worth it. This is a battle that's worth joining. We probably won't win, but we have the battle publicly, and it helps people to decide in 2022, do you want people who come into your medical office, into your doctor's office, and tell you what kind of things you have to take as far as a patient that get between you and your doctor? So ultimately, we probably don't have the votes, but it's worth having. And I think what you saw in the election in Virginia and New Jersey last night is there's a wave of dissatisfaction over this enormous government that's getting involved in our medical lives, our business lives, our personal lives. And so I think the battle's worth it. I doubt we finally get enough votes, but we'll be close. I think we'll be close to the 50, but you have to get to 51.
Well, given what took place in Virginia in particular, but other places across the country, do you not think that maybe some of the your Democratic colleagues in the Senate and some over in the House might be thinking a little bit more about self-preservation?
You would think. You would think that's the message they would get. Instead, what I've been hearing on television today is Democrats moving forward and saying, oh, the only reason we didn't win is we didn't get enough of our agenda through fast enough, and they see us as being ineffective. I think that's the wrong message. I think the message is they've been spending too much, borrowing too much, that people are seeing inflation in the grocery store, they're seeing rising prices at the gas pump, and they frankly don't believe all the Democrats sort of, you can have something for free, that there is a free lunch that everybody can have, or free daycare, or free school. I think people are smarter than that. I think people were rightly upset about the nightmarish withdrawal from Afghanistan. So there's a lot of things going on, and none of it really very appealing to the American voter. So no, I think these things are a disaster, but I'm not sure the Democrats have gotten the right message. Some of them are hunkering down saying, oh no, we just need to get our agenda, our socialist big spending agenda through quicker, which I think is the wrong lesson.
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing that same message, and I've been stunned by that, because the message coming from voters is the exact opposite. It's not that they haven't succeeded in getting their agenda through, it's that they succeeded too much in getting what they're wanting to do, and that is move the nation toward a socialist country. Let me move on to a related note. Last night, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention signed off on giving the Pfizer shots to millions of kids ages 5 to 11. How concerned are you about this, that this could lead to mandates, that once they've given this green light to the shots for tots, we're going to see this being mandated for kids to go to school and elsewhere?
I think without question, the next step is the government will try to force you to get vaccinated for COVID at every age. They're going to eventually try to force everybody and say, you can't go to school, you can't participate in sports, you can't participate in band or choir or any of the extracurriculars unless you're vaccinated. I don't think the science supports that. In fact, the science actually tells me the opposite. If I had a child that was 5, 10, or 15 years old, and they told me that he or she had to be vaccinated, my first question would be, Well, what if they've already had it? And there's a test. I would go to my pediatrician. I would say, can you test my child to see if he's had COVID? Because if he or she has had it, I think there may be an increased risk from being vaccinated if you've already had the disease. There is some conjecture that the rare complication of myocarditis, particularly in young males, is more common in young males who've already had the disease who then get inoculated. So the vaccine studies actually exclude people if you've already had the disease. So when they say the vaccine is safe, they're saying safe, but they haven't tested it in people who already had COVID because they thought that would confound their studies. So they excluded kids who have already had COVID from the vaccine safety studies. So I think there are still some unknowns. I think this is not a not lethal disease for kids. And particularly if your kids have already had the disease, in no way, shape, or form is this a lethal disease for someone who's already suffered and recovered and is under the age of 18. So none of the science supports this. It's mostly because Fauci won't admit natural immunity. He thinks we have to vaccinate the kids because over 100 million Americans have already had the disease.
Right.
He doesn't count them at all. So if they're not counted, he still feels, oh, we're woefully short on vaccinated. So he thinks we have to force you to vaccinate your kids. It's all based on bad science.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, the White House is crowing over the fact that the president's pending mandate has already had an effect, saying that 70% of adults in the United States are now fully vaccinated and 80% have received at least one shot, which they call a major milestone. This amounts to more than 190 million people receiving at least one dose of a vaccine or shot. You add to that the number of people who have already had the virus and have natural immunity. I mean, what is sufficient? I mean, we're at 80% having one dose. I mean, what we have to get 85%, 90%. I mean, what is going to satisfy them?
Well, and realize that the vast majority of people who have been vaccinated so far have done so voluntarily, just listening to the information. Over age 65, over 90% of people have voluntarily agreed to take the vaccine because they listened to this and they heard that this was a disease that is much more deadly for those over 65. And guess what? The American people are smart. Most of them chose to be vaccinated. And I think that's great. But the thing is they say it's not enough. This is purely because they're discounting the over 100 million people that have gotten it. If you count them, plus the 90% of 65-year-olds that got vaccinated, plus over age 50, I think it's 75%. But this isn't the mandate that caused this. Voluntarily, right. People chose to get vaccinated. Still, the people who are largely unvaccinated are the younger, healthier people. And most of them will be fine. But I'm still not saying don't get vaccinated. I think if you have risk factors, by all means, or if you just feel more comfortable, by all means, do it. But we shouldn't mandate it. A mandate for someone to inject something in your body is not consistent with a free society and not consistent with our founding as a country.
And I actually think it is a barrier to some people getting the vaccine because they're not going to do it if they're being forced to do it.
Exactly right. And I've made this point. They talk about vaccine hesitancy, and I blame Dr. Fauci more than anybody else for this. Because he's been dishonest with us on many other things, then people think he's being dishonest on the vaccine. So frankly, I think the vaccine does reduce your risk for being very sick. You still may get it, but I think you will get less sick if you've been vaccinated. I think that is an honest fact. But because Dr. Fauci has said cloth masks work, they don't work, because he's changed his mind on so many things, because he's talking about dating on Tinder and whether you should go to a restaurant or whether you can visit your family, because he's so bizarre and over the top on all these things he's advocated, he's turned off so many people that if people are hesitant to believe what government says, they're like, well, Fauci lies all the time. Maybe he's lying about the vaccine. I'm trying to give a reasoned middle position that my recommendation would be, if you're at risk, take the vaccine, but voluntarily so. And I think over 65 without question, and I think under 65 and overweight at any age, probably it is reasonable, particularly over age 18. But the thing is, talk to your doctor. This is an individualized decision. This isn't something that I or Fauci or anybody in government should tell you what to do. All I can do is tell you some advice, and then you should make the decision. But this is the problem with central planning, whether it's in economics or medicine. You let one person make the decision, and what if they're wrong? That's why we have thousands of doctors and millions of doctors and everybody making decisions, and then you arrive at the truth in your own way with your interactions with your doctor and information.
You know, it's worked for 245 plus years. I think we should stick with letting the Americans make their own decisions based upon the recommendations of their doctors and others. Senator, we're out of time. Always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.